Does this sound like a familiar story to you? You hear that a movie like The Creator was shot on the Sony FX3, a $4,000 full-frame mirrorless camera, which by the way is the exact camera that you're watching me on right now. So you go out and you buy one for yourself. You shoot your film project and you watch the footage back, and if you're like me and you came from an iPhone, you're blown away by the color depth and the sharpness and everything that the image has to offer, but you quickly realize that none of your favorite films actually look like that, and you wonder why. Well, that's because the FX3, like any digital cinema camera, is basically just capturing data. So those data are then processed in post, and because you're working with data, you have the ability to shape that data however it is that you like. But that's sort of where the challenge comes in. How do you breathe life into digitally captured media, and how do you get that life to transfer through the processing and all of that, since you're not actually working with analog film where you have to do chemical processes to bring that film to life? Well, that is where Dehancer Pro comes into play. This plugin is available for DaVinci Resolve, Adobe After Effects, Adobe Premiere, and Final Cut Pro. So pretty much any of the major editing programs that you want to use will take full advantage of this plugin, which includes native support for hundreds of camera profiles, film log support, 63 film profiles, and print option profiles for 8, 16, 35, and 65mm film. Emulation, you also have a film developer, you have a compression tool, you have film stocks like Kodak 2383 and Fujifilm 3515 print, CMY color head and print toning, film grain, film damage, halation, bloom, film breath, gate weave, defringe, vignette, and even monitoring features like false color and clipping, so that way you can reference during your color grading. Dehancer also comes with the ability to export any of the settings that you create into your own custom unique LUT, so that way you can quickly apply any of your previous grades to new footage, and it also has support for ACES and DaVinci Wide Gamut. So before we continue with the rest of the review, I really wanted to talk about pricing. So Dehancer comes in a range of packages depending on what your needs may be. So you can buy this under a subscription model if you choose. This is particularly useful if you guys are working on a project that calls for film aesthetic and you want to add that onto the cost of your production budget. You can do that. You can get it for 3 months for $150, 6 months for $199, or a year for $299. But if you feel like you're going to be using Dehancer on a more regular basis or on a lot of projects, you can go ahead and you can purchase a perpetual lifetime license for $499. And all of the packages include 2 seats, so that way if you're working on a team, you can give the colorists up to 2 of them access at a time. Finally, this also works on Mac, Windows, and Linux, so no matter what system you or your production company work off of, this is going to be a solution that'll work for you. Lastly, Dehancer did give me this license in exchange for an honest review, and they also gave me a discount code which is going to give you guys 10% off of all of their photography or videography products that you may choose to purchase. So if you do want to get any of these, definitely make sure that you go to use that code when you go to get Dehancer. Again, that code is going to be up here, or if you're just listening on audio, it's JMT10. So starting off here, when you decide to buy Dehancer, the setup is really easy. So you just need to go and head over to dehancer.com, then click on download and get free trial. Then you just want to choose where you need to put the download. When it's finished, just open up that zip file. It'll unzip everything, put it into a folder, and give you all of the tools, including a really nice and detailed manual. So definitely go ahead and read that, since there's so much that Dehancer can do, and I may not cover every single thing, but all of that is in there. It also explains what all of the tools are for and what they do. So if you're not particularly familiar with a particular film technique or film terminology, it goes over all of that for you. And once you do that, just open up the installation file, go through all of the prompts, click install, and it will put that all into your computer and make it available for you right when you open up your editing software of choice. So for me, that's going to be DaVinci Resolve. So we just head over to the color page, drop Dehancer Pro into a new node, and then to finish your setup, all you're going to need to do is just scroll down to the bottom and you just click on Check Profiles. This is going to ensure that Dehancer has all of the latest camera models and profiles loaded for you. Finally, if you do buy a license, simply click on License Info. Then you can log into your account, or you can manually enter the code that you were given. Though it's not a major problem, I do want to note that at least for me, when I was logging into my Dehancer account inside of the plugin, it didn't automatically populate my license. So maybe the Dehancer team just needs to work out a small bug or something like that. Regardless though, it's not the end of the world, since the manual key entry is not hard to do and it will absolutely work for you. So if you do have any difficulties, just go with that. I also want to note that Dehancer does update regularly, and they do announce when they're going to be doing updates via social media and their newsletter, so definitely make sure that you follow them or at least subscribe to their newsletter so that we can stay tuned for any of those updates. And if they do come out with major feature updates, just be sure that you deactivate your license from your current Dehancer version and then go through the standard installation process that I outlined in the previous section. And that will give you the newest version, so that way you can just simply apply your license key to the new version. If you don't do this, you're going to be using up your second seat, so just be aware of that. Now, let's get straight into some quick demonstrations of some of the features that they have built into Dehancer and how you can use them to really enhance your film projects. So let's get straight over to the editing desk. So let's go to this clip here, which has a lot of nice colors. This was shot on an anamorphic lens, so we have those nice anamorphic flares. We also have the sun star. Lots of kind of cool stuff going on here. So we'll change this to our clip level. And right here, we can go in our library and scroll all the way down, and you'll see Film Emulation Dehancer Pro. So we'll just drag that onto our clip. You'll see that instantly something happens. So right now, by default, it has source as Rec 709, which we are not currently in. So if you do want to add this in post after a color space transform from DaVinci Resolve, you can do that. Or we can do this as a all-encompassing thing inside of Dehancer Pro. So we can go here and choose camera, then vendor, we'll go to Sony, and this was shot on an FX3, so Cinemaline FX3, and S-Log3, S-Gamut3. So now we have our base look for the FX3. So you can see that that looks pretty good. It's definitely different than the standard DaVinci Resolve color gamut, but that is okay because we do have some film stuff that gets applied automatically. So let's go here, and what we can do is we can say choose any of these films. We have a ton of different film stocks to go through. I'm not going to go through every single one of them right now, but we can find something that looks good. Note also that there's some black and white ones, which are pretty fun. But let's go and choose... All right, you know what? I think the Fuji Chrome Provia 100F looks pretty good to me. So this is kind of giving me some of that warm look, which is what I was going for when I was filming. I wanted it to look very warm and have a nice contrast between the blue, cool, anamorphic flares. So I think that this looks pretty good. We can also play around here with the EV, so you can change the exposure value for the film stock. So I think probably where it's at is fine, maybe a little bit lower. We can go in here and we can play around with the film developer if we want. So if you want to enable any of the attributes of Dehancer Pro, you can just go here and click on enabled. Now it's enabled, and now we can play around with some of these tools. So we can say contrast boost, which emulates some of the film techniques that you would use to increase contrast. So it does so in a very organic way. It's not digital. We also can play around with gamma correction, so you can see what that's doing. Color separation, you can change that if you want. It makes the colors a little bit more compressed. Probably something that would be easier to see on a vector scope. Yeah, so you can see that that's kind of shrinking our gamut a bit. If we bring it down, leave it up. You can also do color boost. This is sort of a natural saturation increase. So you can see that here on the high end, those sun stars get really, really gold. The red on the flag really pops. So you can kind of play around with this as much as you want. Let's say leave it about there. You can also play around with defringing. This can be something that would be good if you have any sort of issues with weird halos showing up around bright objects. This will help with that. It's not necessary, but it can be a useful thing for you guys. And we can also play around with temperature compensation. So if you're using a film stock that runs a little bit warm, you can cool it down. If it runs a little bit cool, you can warm it up. So this is for that type of operation. I think right about there looks pretty good. You can also play around with tint compensation. So if it's a little bit too magenta or a little bit too green, again, you can shift around there. Defringing. There's not really any fringing going on here in this shot, so we're going to leave it the way that it is. So here we have film compression. So this is something that will sort of compress the colors together a bit. If we do impact, you'll see that our colors get compressed quite a lot. It shrinks everything towards the center, and it looks a lot more dull. You can also have it as a zero impact, and so that's sort of the other extreme. We have a little bit more saturation there. So you can play around with that if you want. I think we are going to not necessarily do this for this particular project, since I do want it to be pretty saturated, since it's kind of a fun, lighthearted vibe. But if you are working with something where playing with film compression would help, there is that option. For expand here, we can change some of the parameters. So this sort of expands our color gamut in the low and the high end, so that way we can fill it out a little bit better. So you'll see that a lot of our levels are right around 128 for the minimum. If we wanted to bring them a little bit closer to 0, we can just increase this, and you'll see that we drop our levels quite a bit. So that is something that you can play around with if you really want to fill out your gamut as much as possible. You can also raise your whites if you want. So I think right about there is probably okay. All right, so then we can go down here, and you can also do a print. So here we have linear print is what is default. You can also do Cineon film log, so that is what this looks like. So you'll see that it gives you this nice log type profile. We can do a Fujifilm 3513. We can do Kodak 2383. Or Kodak Indora glossy paper. So this will kind of give you that nice print look if that's what you're going for. If you want it to look really, if you want it to look like something that would actually be in print, you can have that kind of look. We can change our exposure value. Maybe something like that. Tonal contrast. So this is sort of a expansion of your gamut, widening the gap between the darks and the lights. Color density. So you can make it more desaturated or more saturated in local environments. So you can see, particularly with this flag here, that section gets very, very red if we have the color density on full. If we lower it a bit, you can see that it dulls it up a bit. So I think probably somewhere right around here is fine. Saturation, leave that at 100. If you want to desaturate it, you can make it black and white all the way if you want. You can also limit the range to analog, so that is something that you can do as well. So now if we go here to color head, you can change the yellow, blue, green, magenta, all of that in your stock. So here we can really play around a lot. We can add in some blues if we wanted, or we can actually remove them. So you can get really detailed with your changes. You can also click on this gang, and this will just adjust all of them together. So it's really like a tint type of change, or you can of course deconvolute them and you can make your changes as separate changes if you want. But we're going to reset that since it doesn't quite look good and it's not exactly what I'm going for. But you can also change the tone of your shadows. So if you want to have something more warm in the shadows, you can put it to 100. If you want it more cool, minus 100, or anything in between. You can also change your mid-tone tint. So we make the mid-tones a little bit warmer or not. Highlights, you can change if we want the highlights to be really warm. So you can also cool them down if you want. So there's a lot of fun things that you can do to play around here. You can also preserve exposure or not, and you can change the impact. So if you want to make this just a very subtle change, you can do that. If you want to make it a very prominent change, you can also do that. So for film grain here, we have a whole bunch of profiles. So if we zoom in a lot, you can see that we're getting that nice film grain pattern. We can do a custom one if we want. If you know a lot about how to emulate film, you can of course make a custom one, or you can use any of these presets. And personally, I think that the presets look fantastic. So here we have 8mm ISO 50, 8mm ISO 250. You can see there's a lot of grain. ISO 500, you can see that's very, very grainy. So that gives a lot of texture to our overall image. Perhaps not exactly what we want in this case. 35mm ISO 250. I think that looks like a pretty solid film grain profile for this particular project. And then we'll go and add in some halation maybe. So halation is great for giving that nice dreamy look, particularly with attacking the highlights and sort of giving you that nice blooming effect. So we can do different types of halation. You can do 8mm. You can do no remjet. You can do 16mm Super 16. You can do no remjet for Super 16, Super 35, Super 35. No remjet. We can also do 65mm/70mm or 65-70mm with no remjet. So there's a lot of different options here. I think we'll probably stick with the 35mm. So now we'll go here and we'll add in some bloom. So you can do different blooms from different film stocks. So you can see that we have the same 8, 16, 35, and 65mm options, and of course you have custom. So I think we're going to, again, stick with 35mm for the bloom. If we turn that off and on, you can see that it kind of brings up some of these edges a bit more. If we go here to film damage, we can add in some film damage if you want. That is going to add in some little artifacts and maybe some hairs or other types of things like that as the film plays. We can also change that to 8mm. So you'll see right here we have pretty pronounced scratching and other types of things like that. So if you want to have that real authentic beat up old film look, you can absolutely do that. We can also go here to do film breath. Film breath is a very interesting effect, and it's not something that I particularly understand entirely, but it can kind of change the distance between the film and the light source from what I understand. And so you can change how that is going to look, and it'll sort of give this more organic look to your film. But we'll leave that on off for right now. You can also do gate weave. Again, this is another sort of more complex type of film concept, but you can see here what that kind of looks like for Super 35. If we change it to Super 8, it'd be a little bit more pronounced. You can see that it's kind of wiggling our frame around a little bit. So it gives you that really interesting organic film replaying type of look. So that is pretty cool if you want to play around with some of those types of things. We can also use vignetting. So this will kind of give you that organic vignette look. It's not really like a digital vignette. It kind of looks a little bit more natural than those. But of course we can change the exposure. We can make it lower, higher. Typically vignettes, you'd make it a little bit lower. So we'd have it somewhere around here. You can also change the size of it. You can change the feather. So obviously if you have it here, it's going to look pretty harsh and unnatural. But if we feather it out a bit, it looks pretty good. But again, we're not going to do vignetting for right now. And then here we can go and do false color. So you can see here that everything is within our range. We're not really clipping anywhere. Even the sun, it's pretty hot, but it's not clipping, so we are pretty good. In the shadow here, we are clipping right underneath this dormer, but we're fine elsewhere, so I think it's a pretty good overall exposure. You can see if we turn on clipping indication that you'll see we have blue highlighted right here, so we are clipping the shadows, but I don't think that's the end of the world for this particular scene. Then here for output, you can change the total amount of impact. So you can see here we have our log footage, and here is our graded footage with this particular tool. So you can see Dehancer does a lot for us, and it really makes the image look quite alive. It's definitely a lot more lively and a lot more interesting, I think, than just the standard color space transform and other basic color tools that you get with something like Resolve. This really does give you a lot of control over your look, and I think it, looks pretty fantastic. Another thing to note is that if you are just going through and editing things, leave your quality on fast, but make sure that when you go to export that you change it to high. If you don't change it to high, things are going to look kind of unnatural and a little bit wonky. They've done a lot of work to emulate the way that film looks when you run it back, and a lot of those types of things are sort of omitted in the normal mode. So definitely when you go to export, make sure that you change everything to high. That will, of course, add on to your export time, but it'll make your footage look so much better. And also, if we want to do a LUT generation here, we can do that. So you can change any input transforms. You can disable those if you want. So that basically just means that you can take your normal color space transformed footage and then throw this on top of it. If you don't have this checked, then it would add in that color space transform on top of your footage. So depending on how you work, you may or may not want to have this checked. And then you can also change your LUT size to a small 17 by 17 by 17 or normal 33 by 33 by 33 LUT. So you have a couple of options there. And yeah, so that is pretty much it as far as Dehancer and how it works inside of DaVinci Resolve. Really a lot of stuff and a lot of things that you can tool around with. You can really get any type of look that you want, and I think that that is absolutely fantastic. So definitely check it out. It's really cool, a lot of fun to use, and I think it'll really enhance your projects overall. So let's get back into the rest of the video. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that in-depth look at Dehancer Pro and that you liked some of the footage that we graded. The footage was originally from my short film about the life of my dog Bella, which was actually produced before I had a chance to work with Dehancer. They reached out to me a little bit afterwards, so unfortunately the film on YouTube doesn't have all of these really nice color grades, but you can at least see them in this video. Honestly though, I really liked the look of the film before using Dehancer, but after adding some of the film effects and film looks that Dehancer has and modifying it with Dehancer, I really wouldn't want the film to look any other way. I really love what Dehancer has done to my film. I think it really adds a lot of character and a lot of life to the film, and it really gives you that nice nostalgic, dreamy type of feeling, which is exactly what I was going for with the original film. But I didn't quite get there with my initial grade, so I really think that this does a great job of tastefully removing some of the digital harshness of your footage and giving you something that you're going to absolutely love right out of the box with very minimal tweaking. And I think that this is something that'll really increase your production value. You can definitely charge for it if you're doing client work. And yeah, I think if you're going for something that's stylized or you just want to subtly add some filmic artifacts, this is absolutely something that should be on your radar. And Dehancer Pro should definitely be your go-to tool for it, since it's so easy to set up, get running, and you can get results really easily. So even if you're not a professional colorist, I think that this is a great thing for you guys to have. But with that being said, again, if you guys do want to try out any of Dehancer's products for yourself, they have photography ones, they have videography ones, just make sure that you use JMT10 to save 10% on your purchase of any of their plugins. Just note though that if you do want to try out their iOS application subscription, that falls under a different licensing umbrella, so unfortunately my code is not going to work for that, but hopefully I will be able to show off some of the iOS features in a future video. I'll work with Dehancer to try to make that happen for you guys. But just so that you guys know, the iOS application does actually have some of the same features and functionalities that you're going to get with desktop Dehancer, and it's specifically optimized to work with mobile, so to work on your iPhones, iPads, all of that good stuff, and it'll add, again, a really nice filmic look to your footage, which is really going to be great, especially for those of you guys who are working with the amazing new camera on the iPhone 15 Pro series. So I hope you guys liked the video, and if you did, definitely be sure to smash that like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below. So do you guys use Dehancer? Are you interested in trying it? Definitely let me know. And also make sure to share this with any of your filmmaker friends, since I'm sure that they will absolutely love this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Later.
My name is Bella, and this is my world. As you can see, my life is pretty exciting because I have a pretty awesome theme song. So, where do I begin? Well, I live in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. I actually live right here in this house. In the good old US of A. And this is what a typical day looks like for me. Oh, by the way, I should probably mention that I'm a dog. So, I start off my mornings right here in this bed. Since my legs are kind of small though, I always struggle a little bit to get out of bed. But when I gather enough courage, I hop right down and begin my day. As I race down the hallway, I go to say hi to my best friend in the world, TT Bear. Or, as you might say, Tim the Bear. Then it's off to the kitchen to go get some food, since I can't prep it for myself since I don't have hands. I always supervise to make sure that I'm not getting scammed because I need to get exactly 18 grams of food every single day. after I eat, it's time to go explore the outdoors. Anytime there's squirrels or deer in my yard, I get kind of upset, so I tell them to go somewhere else, because this is my yard, after all. But, after all that, it's time for my favorite activity of the day. Watching the cereal get made. And I don't really care too much about the cereal, but what I do care about is those sweet apples. So, once it gets to my mom, I like to get in close, whether it's on her shoulder or standing on her legs. I don't really care. All I care about is getting what's coming to me, which is apples. Then I take a quick mid-morning nap, but then after that I wait around until my dad gets finished making his soup, and then I get to steal his peas. But then it's time to play. And if you don't know, soccer is one of my favorite games to play. Although I guess since I'm a Yorkshire Terrier, I should probably say football. But since I live in America, I'm gonna say soccer anyway. Normally, my evenings are pretty chill, but tonight it started to rain out, so I gotta go try on some of my clothes. Well, this one is okay, but this one might get wet. It's a little bit too early for this one, and this one would also get wet. Ooh, actually, you know what? I think this one is perfect. Oh, no. Why this one? We don't talk about that one. Well, at least they chose the right one for me. So, let's go outside. Ah, that was awful. I want to come back inside right now. Wait, what? I thought the bad stuff was over. Now I gotta get my teeth brushed before bed. Well, at least that's finally over. Well, now it's time to go to bed and dream about what tomorrow holds.